Hello friends, welcome to Science Talk. First of all, I want to apologize for my long absence. As I left a note for my patrons on Patreon, I have been dealing with some very serious personal issues as of late, and well, that's been taking up my time. But hopefully I'm back, and there's a lot of stories to share with you. And first of all, I thank you for your patience and for your continued support and staying with me. So I have a couple of stories here related to the same topic. And it's a story I've done, it's a topic I've covered before, but it's definitely worth revisiting. And it involves how to cool the planet as the planet continues to warm up. And as I said, there are two stories here that I wish to bring with you to your attention. And the first is that dealing with air conditioning refrigeration. Air conditioning is already causing some political indigestion, you could say, and refrigeration could literally become a burning issue. And what I mean by that is, as you need energy to run refrigeration and air conditioning units, and guess where that energy is going to come from? It's going to come from burning the fossil fuels, which adds more CO2, methane into the atmosphere, further warming the atmosphere, and it's just not creating a very good situation. So in the first study, here's some interesting, something you don't really hear about. In the next 3 decades, cooling a warmer world will bring drastically increasing demand for equipment to help cool things down. So there's going to be more demand for energy to run air conditioners, cold storage areas, refrigerated transport, and medical cold chains. I don't really think about how there's a lot of, for example, very important, critically vital vaccines. You got to keep them refrigerated, otherwise they're not good. They lose their efficacy and they're not of any use. Such demands could increase fivefold over the next 3 decades. So this new study calculates that between now and 2050, an estimated 19 cooling appliances will be sold every second. Just think about that. Boom, 19. Boom, another 19. And to meet global demand 3 decades on the number of cooling appliances could reach 14 billion. Well, now the other thing to think about that is you have to get the materials to build these units. So we're talking mining operation, because recycling can only go so far. So we're talking mining operations, which uses diesel power, which is, right? Fossil fuel. So it's going to only exacerbate the situation. So the other great driver for change, and this is from scientists at the University of Birmingham in the UK, in their report, A Cool World, is the need to meet the UN development goals to reduce economic inequality, and basically as well as extend and enhance the lives of the poorest people, make food supplies safe, reduce waste, which can create issues in the environment, and find new ways to deliver health to the poorest folks around the globe. So, A Cool World, this is the report they have issued. I will supply to you the URL link to this report. It is quite detailed. It is a good report. It presents a lot of interesting data, and there's more in there than I would really take the time to go into, because I could end up talking about this easily for over an hour. So I will provide the URL link for this video, for this report. You'll find it in the description box below. So the report continues saying that the reality is that investment in energy to keep things cool or cool things down could make the world even more dangerously hot for the reasons I mentioned at the outset. Okay. Total energy consumption for cooling must be kept to 6,300 terawatt hours a year. If we are to keep cooling to no more than 2 degrees C. We're trying to keep it to 1.5 degrees C, and that is unlikely. We're already at 1.3, and we're probably just going to blow right past 1.5. Current projections are that by 2100, the planet will have warmed by 3 or 4 degrees C, which will be catastrophic for human civilization. Right now, cooling demands 3,600 terawatt hours a year. But the indications are, from, as these Birmingham scientists say, is that 2050 demand could require 19,600 terawatt hours a year. Not quite six-fold increase, about a 5 to 6-fold increase. So they're basically saying that if the nations are to meet the climate goals as agreed to at the in Paris, nations need to think again how to devise more efficient methodologies and less costly cooling strategies. So it's a depressing problem. And the problem is enormous, and researchers have already established that potentially lethal levels of heat and humidity are on the way for some regions around the planet. Some of the estimates include that the Middle East by 2060 will be uninhabitable. Temperatures will be extremely way too hot. So you can help by cutting food waste. Food waste will lessen the impact on the environment. So some of the extra energy demand could be met from renewable energy sources, solar and wind, but the level that is needed to, say, switch to solar and wind is of such proportion that that is very unlikely to have sufficient units of solar and wind in place to meet the growing demand. In other words, we're still going to be having to use fossil fuels to provide refrigeration. Solar and wind, while helpful, will not be enough on the market, enough in place to help with that demand. To green the world's air conditioning by 2050 would consume 80% of all the wind and solar energy so far expected on stream 3 decades from now. If the technology of cooling is not made more efficient, it could take up more than 100%. So in other words, it's just simply not enough green energy sources to run refrigeration, electric cars, electricity, etc. Excuse me. So Toby Peters of the University of Birmingham's Energy Institute, one of the authors of this report I have cited here, says the challenge now is how to start with a system-led approach, better harnessing a portfolio of energy resources and adopting new novel technologies. In order to achieve this, we need to start asking ourselves a new question. No longer how much electricity do we need to generate, but rather what is the service we require and how can we provide it in the least damaging way. So in other words, it's a new paradigm way of thinking about this problem. So the second study that I wish to share with you. Students who live in air-conditioned dormitories in the U.S. will, during a heat wave, do better in tests demanding concentration and cognitive skill than those students who are left sweating it out, literally and figuratively, you could say, at night. So in other words, a cooler environment will help thinking processes and enable students to focus better on the exams. So it is known that extremes of heat does present a serious danger problem to older folks. Okay? Their bodies are not able to thermoregulate as efficiently, and they can become hyperthermic, and overheat. Temperatures start rising too much, proteins break down, it can lead to death. So, in the study that I just briefly introduced, talking about, college students, university students, this is from a study, so it's looking at basically not necessarily the elderly, but people that would be considered in their prime, in a study called the Public Library of Science Journal, or PLOS Medicine, PLOS, the Public Library of Science. And this is a report done by U.S. scientists. They proved their point with tests. In the summer of 2016, in a period marked by a 5-day heat wave, they looked at 44 students, 24 housed in modern buildings with air conditioning, 20 in much older buildings with no such temperature controls. The students who kept cool at night were not just faster in their responses to tests, but were more accurate. So basically, if your brain gets too hot, it ain't going to work. What it comes down to. Okay. That's why lots of times part of the process when they do medically induced comas is to cool the body down a bit to help brain functions. So as I have shared with you before, we have a situation where as the human population increases, we're on track now for 9.5 billion by 2050. We're like 7.5, 8 billion now. As human population increases, demand for energy will keep increasing, which means, if we continue as business as usual, continue burning fossil fuels, we're going to add more and more CO2 to the atmosphere, warming things up more and more and more. And then, as sort of a positive feedback loop, we now require more cooling appliances, which will burn more fossil fuels, and you get the idea. So, and even if we were to, as a species, were to stop this very instant burning no more fossil fuels, there is enough thermal inertia in the system that temperatures will continue to rise. So definitely, if civilization is to persist and survive, we need a total rethinking of our infrastructure, of how we meet our energy requirements. There's just no way around it. This has to be done. So I thank you for your time, and kind of good to be back. Again, my apologies for the delay, but there was some stuff going on. They're still there, but c'est la vie, right? So we'll talk soon. Hey folks, this is Jim here reminding you to subscribe to this channel, to share my videos, tell others of the work that I do here. I also ask that if you are not already a patron at Patreon, to please consider becoming a patron at Patreon. You can find the information in the description box below the video. I'm asking you to help support the work that I do. I do not take any money from corporations or from any other sources, so The information I share with you is the actual science as it comes out of the peer-reviewed journals. So there is no BS, there's no propaganda, there's no agenda. It's just I present the science and I explain to you what it means, or at least my interpretations of it, based on my own experience as a scientist. I want this channel to grow. I consider, while I discuss many different topics here, you notice I do focus a lot on climate issues. I consider climate change to be the most pressing issue facing humanity today. Thus, I consider it important to disseminate this information to a wider and wider, more and more people. And I need your help to do this. So, yes, please subscribe. Please tell others of the work that I do here. Please share my videos on social media platforms, with your social media groups, what have you. We need to get this information out there. So for those of you who are supporting me on Patreon, I thank you greatly for your support and continued support. It does mean a lot to me. So together we can get this information to more and more people. Thank you. Thank you for your support.